Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. And you're such a good folk singer.
Thank you very much.
I love that, and I mean that in the sweetest possible way. You mentioned that you're out there kind of celebrating the 20th anniversary of Mortal City, and I just wanted to talk to you about that. So what makes you want to do that now?
Well, it was funny. The album came out, and it had these kind of social frontiers in it, because I was out on the road with The Honesty Room, which was my first album, and so there I was, seeing all these things in the country, and I was watching all these social frontiers starting to change. I was up in, I was staying with a friend who was going to Naropa. She rebirthed me for a class.
Oh, wow.
And apparently I had a rough time. But
First time or the second time?
Well, the second time we got to talk about it, which
I
I
see.
didn't have
Yeah,
the
yeah.
luxury of the first time. So, but I was just watching all sorts of things happening, and so Mortal City was kind of my witnessing of the social frontiers that were changing and shifting in this country faster than the media was maybe giving them credit for. So things like more people, more different kinds of religions and orientations sitting down at the holiday table, and the heartfelt, wonderful progressivism of the Midwest, which is what I saw. It wasn't, you sort of have these thoughts that you're going to come to this place and it's going to be very uniform. It's very diverse, and it was wild and fun, and so that album kind of lived in the world because it was witnessing all of those things, right. And people responded to that album a lot. It just sold a lot of copies, so we decided to do it again. I think that's really what I was trying to say.
Well, if you're successful once, why not replicate it and do it again? Go back to what works.
Yeah.
Don't screw the formula here, Don. So, but I do want to ask you about, because songs can take on new meanings in a new context. So we live in a different era now. So when you revisit these songs, do they reveal themselves in different ways?
They totally do. I mean, especially the ones that I hadn't really played for over a decade. The title of the album is Mortal City, and this country. What happened in 1995? I remember touring around with my boyfriend at the time, Charlie, and he said, "Look at these downtowns. This is the future." And all the downtowns were boarded up. And he said, "There's this thing coming called a big box store." And I said, "What's a big box store?" And that's how fast things moved. And so, so you had these malls and the big boxes, and all this life was being sucked out of the downtown. And there was this kind of prediction that that's the way it was going to be. And then I was in Keene, New Hampshire around 1998, and they were renovating an opera house, and they were so excited. It was freezing. Oh, my God. But, because that's the last thing that comes is the comfort for the artist. It's all like creaky and weird downstairs. But they were talking about little landscaping projects and a new cafe and a this and a that. People just so wanted to come back to the center of their towns and their cities, and it wasn't just the Utne Reader talking about it, or eTown. It was people really finding these excuses to find their way back. And so the landscape is transformed now. You don't see those boarded up things. So Mortal City was one thing when I wrote the album. It was this hope, this belief that we are not lost in the mortal city. We have each other. But now there is the comfort of seeing how beautifully people have come back to the centers of their towns and their cities. It's an incredible thing to see.
Yeah. And what's interesting is, you've heard the phrase "all politics is local." You, as a mom and as a wife and as a family person, are pretty involved in your hometown, and you have an interesting opportunity in your hometown to engage in politics that is both local and bigger than that, because you share your hometown with Roger Ailes,
the former CEO of Fox News, Roger Ailes. Yes.
Yeah.
And since the last time I was here, he threatened a lawsuit against me. So it was, and actually, that's nice. I have to say, it's funny because I was in the middle of working on this book that is going to come out next fall that's called What I Found in 1,000 Towns. And it's all about the ways that people in this kind of post-Aquarian world have found ways to just be sitting on their park benches, bringing life back to their downtowns. And what was interesting is his wife owned our local paper and has just sold it, but there was this kind of way of turning everything into a division and everything into a manufactured outrage. And so what I tell people is that, you see the shark swimming in the ocean. We sort of got to see it up close, swimming in our pond. And I don't dislike Roger Ailes, actually. I met him a few times, and he's very charming. He's very funny. It's disarming, But this tactic of turning everything into an opportunity to humiliate, intimidate, and if that doesn't work, legally threaten a person, I think is something that we saw played out within our small town. And it's hilarious because the people in our town are fantastic, but they think of themselves as divided. And it's crazy because they're not. They're cantankerous and they're naysayers and they're a pain, but that doesn't mean, maybe some people in the audience, I've worked on a lot of projects with people and I don't like them at all, but I love them because I respect them so much and they have skills that I don't have. Like liking them doesn't have anything to do with them or having the same politics. If we're gonna build a birdhouse project, you can hold the hammer and I'll sing you a song. and
we don't have to like each other.
No. In fact, that would be kind of bland.
Right.
So
I'll work on that.
So it was interesting to see what that kind of attitude did to a town, and I learned a lot. I feel like I got sort of inoculated against.
You did
that faith that we're divided with. You have to inoculate yourself and understand there's always an opportunity to build a bridge wherever you go, and it's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, it's not many of us. I'll say, yeah. Not many of us get to be sort of pilloried on the front page of your local newspaper and then turn around and start doing community events where you're going to connect seniors with kids and decorate the doors of elders on Halloween and do Remember When events and do all these community things that you've been engaged in.
Oh, I didn't know that you... Well, this is what happened. After this thing happened, and this thing happened, and yes, my husband and I were on the front page of the paper for a letter that we wrote, and we were called nasty, and people said, we always thought that they, were better people than this, and this horror, and then on Facebook, just somebody finally said, okay, I get it, everyone's going to show up at their house with pitchforks, and because what was unloosed was the hatred of the community against me, and it was...
And your address.
Yes, and our address, and they also said we verified their signatures in the county seat. Sort of like we were criminals, slightly, prurient, and so I was really freaked out because I knew that there was love for me, in my community. I loved people. I mean, we have tomatoes. I gave a lot of them away. I knew that there was some mutuality, and you're gonna love this, Nick. I was like, what? Okay, what's the common denominator? Because that's what I write about in the book. Just find your common denominator. Yeah. And I was like, well, I think we just got to go really broad here. So we had a Beatles sing-along. And it was fantastic. I mean, just kids with little instruments running around amok. And I really needed it just to see, that we all had this. And a lot of different people showed up. And then from there, I tried to figure out, based on what I've seen other towns do so well, what to do. And a lot of bridges have to do with intergenerational bridges. So we figured out some ways to bring trick-or-treaters to the people who live in the sort of older housing. And it was so much fun. It wasn't a good thing. It was just a fun thing. And towns love to feel fun. And good things come out of that. Yeah.
Well, these are skills that you've learned from being a traveler. These are skills you've learned from watching and from traveling and visiting other communities and being engaged, as I say, in your hometown. Do these lessons of looking for common ground. It's so funny because as musicians, we've traveled to, I played in every state and I've been in all these communities that I may not have otherwise had a chance to see. But we imagine I guess it's mainly through the media, that we are a divided nation and that we have a lot that separates us from other people, but what you see is your songs, your music, your traveling, your opportunity to connect reveals the opposite, that we have a lot in common.
Yeah. Well, actually, somebody told me that Roger Ailes actually came up with the phrase red state, blue state, which is kind of misleading, and it doesn't give us a lot of credit. It puts us into these two very different camps. So, no, what I see is that you're either humorous and cool, or you're not. As a community, it's sort of like, so cool for Dar, not cool for Dar. I think that's my distinction.
Yeah.
But like, we went to a city, but musicians or travelers, you might know this, everybody. But we went to this place in California, and I won't say what it was, but it was a band. And I walked around. It was a somewhat affluent town, but lots of independent stores, a beautiful farmers market. And I went to a natural food store, and all these people had their yoga mats coiled up quite tightly, if you know what I mean. And I just thought, oh. And so I went to the dressing room, and this guitar player, Josh, said, "This town is beautiful, and and everything's this and everything's so clean." And he goes, "I'm not feeling it." And I said, yeah, I'm not feeling it either. So there's this thing I call positive proximity, which is when a town has a feeling of itself where you know that you live next to people, and you know that that's cool. You know that's a good thing. You don't just want to run for your car, lock the doors, go out to your Route 9 and go to the big boxes. You know that you're going to have a tree branch falling somewhere. You know that you're going to overlap somebody's parking spot. You know that's going to happen. That's the given. But what kind of things can you do? Our elementary school, despite all the division, has a garden, and out of the garden has come chef in the classroom and all these wonderful things. There's a tech maker space that parents just said, "Hey, I want to do this," and then other parents are like, "Hey, I'm going to do that too." And suddenly, kids are going off to Harvard, from our little elementary school, because there's so much hands-on, fun and cool stuff.
All right.
Yeah. Oh,
it's
yeah.
so cool. I
won't tell you where I live because you're all going to move there.
I know because I grew up there.
I know.
That's
and
where I
your mom was
started.
a hero there.
Oh.
Yeah.
This little town was pretty interesting back in the day. But we digress.
Yes.
I want to just say one more thing about both of our former neighbors. Pete Seeger.
Yes.
So last time you were here, you did a song. I think it was called Storm King, about Pete. So do you feel his legacy where you are? Do you feel his legacy?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People you feel it when you walk around. He had an expectation that you were always looking out into the world of possibilities and environmental stewardship, but also there's all sorts of little seeds that he planted in Beacon, the town where he lives, and they have really since grown, and they were just starting to grow a lot. But the town is becoming very groovy and very craft beer and all that stuff, but it's also filled with, he created a little folk dance program within the elementary school. He ensured that there would be music and dancing and collaboration so that it wouldn't forget itself. And I think there are some real secrets to how to be civilized from the way he just kept everything grassroots and ensuring that there was music, singing, and dancing wherever he went.
And getting into the schools, reaching out to the kids.
He was always there in the schools
Yeah.
and always there with every kind of kid.
Yeah.
He got kids, you wouldn't believe the kids he got to sing.
Well, Dar, I love the fact that there's a lot of questions about how we're going to navigate these next years and so on. But when you get down to the basics, you've just shared with us some great stories about what's working and how to make things work and how to keep them working. So
I can't help it because it's what I've seen. I think you've seen it too.
Yeah.
Things work.
Yeah. Well, listen, your music works. Your record obviously works because 20 years later, you're still out there doing the same songs, and they have new life, new meaning, and you got a new band. So let's hear some more music.
Thanks, Nick.
All right, welcome back, if you would, along with your band, Dar Williams.